Are we live? Okay, good afternoon, guys. Thanks for attending this session. This session's titled Building a Security Strategy Perimeter to Core. Firewall is no longer enough. We're going to explore several elements on the network, firewall, of course, being one of them, the access media, switches, wireless, VPN. We'll also talk about authentication and endpoint integrity, and then the visibility and audit trail that goes with that. All of it kind of designed to work together. Want to talk a little bit about the threat landscape, what's going on out in the world that we live in, and how we're addressing that. For introductions, my name's Troy Roberts. I'm with Fortinet. I run their secure wireless and access technologies division, so everything that accesses a network usually comes through one of the technologies that my group's in charge of. So hopefully as we go through this, what I want to share with you guys are some of the best practices that we're seeing out in the industry. How are people securing their network outside of just the firewall? Some of the things that they're leveraging, some of the technology that's available today. And the takeaway that I hope you guys leave with is how to put together a strategy. Whether you're there today or trying to get to that security, the sense of security that you need in your network. If you're not there, hopefully I'll share some ideas that give you a great plan to execute against and show you some stuff that's actionable. Everything that is out there today, and for some of you that sat through the previous session, great examples of some of the breaches and threats that are in the world that we live in today. We're going to take a look at some of those. We're going to look at what the cost of some of those breaches are, how they're penetrating the network, and make sure that as we examine the different elements along the network path, that we talk about some of the things that can be done to prevent those. So we're going to look at really 4 key areas. We're going to look at next generation firewall and unified threat management, look at the LAN and wireless LAN, onboarding, and then endpoint integrity. Again, really want to share with you guys what other people are doing. And I guess I kind of, in the title I had that firewall was no longer enough. I kind of compare this to the olden days. If you lived in a castle and you had a moat and a drawbridge, you had pretty good security, right? In the beginning, unless you were going to swim the moat, scale the wall, and attack the castle, pretty tough to do that with any type of force. Very similar to the world that we live in now, right? Firewall used to be enough. But even in the days of castles and medieval knights, they developed certain things, right? Archers with arrows and other tools that could attack this and launch flaming balls into the courtyard of the castle. So pretty soon a moat and a drawbridge were not enough. And that's kind of the world that we live in today. Firewall's not enough, right? Just having something at the perimeter, trying to keep things out, not nearly enough the level of security that will make us not be vulnerable to the threats that are out there today. So, and to kind of prove that, we can do a little math. We can look at what's going on, and I only picked one vertical for today's examples, and that's the education vertical. How much does an average data breach cost? And in education, you would think, well, perhaps it doesn't cost that much because really all I'm protecting are student records, staff records, things like that. But we're going to take, I'm going to leverage the Ponymon report, the Institute report that was commissioned by IBM, and share with you guys some of the costs of that. And then we'll look at a couple specific examples. If you want to read how we calculated the cost, this is actually according to the Ponymon Institute. This is the method they used to calculate it. A couple different things in there, right? A lot of forensics to clean up the mess once a breach has been detected. A lot of services that are outsourced. But there are a bunch of indirect costs that are associated with that. We'll kind of take a look at some of those as we go through there. These guys use the formula to figure out that in the education vertical, a data breach costs roughly $300 per record that is breached. So if we look at in 2014, the top 10 data breaches, you can see there, and I apologize, it's in pretty small font. University of Maryland, College Park, 309,000 records stolen for $92 million. That's just the cost at $300 per record. And you can scroll down the list and read some of those. Indiana University, 146,000 records, $43.8 million, the cost of that data breach. They're very expensive, right? And very unpopular. I think if we look back at 2014, which was a huge year in data breaches, lots and lots of money being spent in data breaches. And when you are a taxpayer-paid entity, it becomes very unpopular to have data breaches. If we take it down to a little bit more regionalized example, let's kind of look at some of the things that are going on in the K through 12 arena. Swedesboro Woolwich School District breached back in March of this year. Unidentified perpetrator, it was ransomware, right? Probably CryptoLocker or something like that. And if you look at what the impact was, that's where really the pain point of the breach comes into attack. They were demanding 128,000 in bitcoins. There wasn't really any data breach, just files encrypted. Computers hacked with data held hostage. Crippled the school from taking park exams, and point-of-sale lunch programs were down. Very inconvenient, right? Not as much hard currency, but definitely inconvenient. If you look at New Brunswick, North Carolina, January 2015, students perpetrated a DDoS attack, so a distributed denial of service attack on the school. Computer network ports were overloaded, and if you look at the impact, loss of instructional time, decreased productivity, inability to execute assessment tests. And that's really tough, right? Especially in a school. If you're all set up to do testing on a day and you can no longer do it, that becomes tough. One close to us here, West Ada School District in Idaho, another distributed denial of service attack. Intermittent access for 10 days across the district. Standardized testing was interrupted. Many students had to retake online exams. We're seeing this particular attack more and more often. So those of you that have looked at like a DDoS protection system, I'm going to share with you a couple things that might scare you even more about those. Denver Public Schools, phishing attack. And the presenter right before me talked a lot about phishing. And you can see how easy people are tripped into a phishing attack, right? This one targeted at teachers, 7 employees clicked on the link. It cost $26,000 in lost paychecks. And of course, then it forces everybody to go change passwords and react to those data breaches. New Drop High School, student perpetrator, data breach, changed grades, changed scheduling, access the network from a smartphone. And of course, anytime there's a data breach like this, what's the first thing that happens? People start to question the data integrity, right? Was that changed at the data breach? Is it still relevant? Is it still valid? Bartlett High School, another data breach by students again. 2 students hacked into the network, attempted installing keystroke logger software, accessed email and student information systems. Then obviously you have to go rescan all of the computers, make sure there's not keystroke loggers on those, and reset all the passwords. And if these data breaches in 2015 weren't enough, here's one from just 2 weeks ago. Columbus School District in Wisconsin, 3 weeks ago. A group of students went to ipstressor.com and paid $17 for a denial of service attack. You can do this today, right? Any of us could go to ipstressor.com and for the cost of a week's lunch money for a student, order a denial of service attack. So the question I would ask is, are you prepared to deal with something like this? A student orders this on your primary IP address or your primary load balanced IP addresses. Are you ready to deal with this? Not to add insult to injury, and I didn't purposely make this fine print, but I captured one of the pages out of an insurance policy covering data breaches. Not really to scare you guys, but to highlight that in a data breach, not everything is covered. Not everything is covered, and the costs usually extend beyond whatever coverage you have. A great example, think Target with $100 million in coverage, less $10 million self-insurance retention, but the total data breach cost was $252 million. And believe me, the $252 million that Target paid to mop up after the data breach was the cheap part, right? Because if you think about, in the case of Target, what was the customer goodwill that was lost? You guys are probably like me, shop at Target. How many of you guys stopped shopping at Target or at least slowed down for a period of time, right? A bunch of us. We felt violated. It was inconvenient. that will cost Target far more money than the $252 million that they spent to clean that up. So if you're a normal business thinking that, hey, I'll just get a good insurance policy and that will cover me for data breach, that's not the case. It'll certainly cover to help you clean up, but in most cases it won't cover the entire cost. So what my goal is to help you guys understand how to avoid the data breach, some of the things that people in the industry are doing to avoid that, how they're preparing their network, what they're building the elements as, and how they're putting together a framework that they can either grow into or get to pretty rapidly. So in education, I'm going to share this example with you, and I apologize that it's so small, some of the writing. I do have this, this is available as one of the presentations from SaintCon. I also have this in a one-page document out at the Fortinet table out in the lobby. But this is our secure student framework, and what I want to do is walk through the different elements of this, show you some of the features of a secure student framework, how we piece it together, how that might play into some of the initiatives that you guys are dealing with today, and hopefully help you guys figure out that you can build a design that will keep you secure. So if we start with firewall, firewall is always the core, or at least it has been and it probably will be moving forward. We're definitely in today's world talking about next-gen firewall. And next-generation firewall is a little different than traditional firewall. It adds a couple elements. It adds application firewall intrusion prevention, so deep packet inspection, website filtering, and antivirus. So those features have been added to your traditional firewall and relabeled as a next-generation firewall. We're also going to talk about unified threat management because most of the next-generation firewalls today include unified threat management. And in unified threat management, what we've done is we've brought together a lot of the point products, if you would, such as web filtering, maybe it was a standalone product, IPS, antivirus, brought them into our next generation firewall UTM platform, collapsed them into a single box. So now you get all of these features in a purpose-built appliance, or maybe it's a VM, designed to do all of these feature set. Now the cool thing about bringing all of these together, and I'm not just speaking of Fortinet, whether it's a Palo Alto box or Checkpoint box or Fortinet, the cool thing about having all of these work to be in the same box is they are designed to work together. So now you've got things like VPN, app control, IPS, web content filtering, all designed to work together and report back to each other so that you can take security action on those events that occur. So over the years, it's been a little challenging to make sure that that correlation of information, the activity taken on those security events, correlates. When they're all put into the same platform, they're designed to work together and do that. So what we see is that these new firewalls, these new appliances, are different from the old one. The old ones were built with standard CPUs. Now we're seeing purpose-built ASICs put into these products as well to really accelerate them. So even though we combine all of this into a UTM platform, we're putting additional processing power, whether that's a network processor to speed up traffic or a content processor to do the things like IPS, antivirus, app control in the same box. So we're not just taking a box and adding more features to it. We're actually building a box that has more content processing power, more CPU cycles to do that. So now that I've got my next-gen firewall, I've got my UTM appliance in place, the second question I would ask, and a new type of technology that we're seeing a lot of interest in, is the question, is one firewall enough? I've got a firewall at the edge, I've got my perimeter protected. Do I need to start looking at segmenting some of the other portions of my network with additional firewalls? Now the great thing about this is I don't necessarily have to take as big a firewall. If I want to segment off a school or a division, maybe finance, I want to put behind a second firewall. We're starting to see a lot more interest in this, and the reason is not just to break up the network and segment it, but it's to provide the additional security services that one division may need over another. There are some advantages to just segmentation. It is much easier to breach and exploit a flat network than it is a segmented one. So just having a firewall on the border is not enough in a flat network. And if you start to take a look at some of the attack vectors of where threats come from, that's where internal segmentation takes or makes a lot more sense, right? I might have remote users, I might have different cloud applications that I'm going to. Placing some additional firewalls within the network to segment that off gives you a lot more protection, right? Because they may breach the perimeter firewall, but if they make it to the inside of my network, but they can't go to any other division or department because I've got a second firewall in place, that doubles my chances of blocking that exploit or that threat. So once I get my firewalls in place, I've got my perimeter firewall, I've got any internal segmentation firewalls in place. Next thing in the framework to look at is start to look at the authentication. And this is where I see, again, this is a big part of my world, this is where I see a lot of times there's oversimplicity. Not enough controls in place, not enough policy enforcement in place. And a lot of times they're just very dependent upon a DHCP server and an Active Directory server to provide all of the authentication services and features that are offered. And I would challenge that there are other services to offer, multi-factor authentication, push and pull of certificate or certificate-based authentication, self-registration. There are other features that can augment that to keep the simplicity, but add a layer of protection. So we'll kind of take a look at some of this. One of my favorite things is two-factor authentication. So I would ask and poll you guys, how many of you guys are using two-factor authentication on all your IT appliances and services? Not necessarily the users, but on the Active Directory servers, switches, firewalls. You guys leverage two-factor authentication? Getting some head nods. If you're not, I would start there. That's a great place to have two-factor authentication. Make sure you know who's accessing that equipment and make sure that there's at least two methods of authentication required to get into that service. So strong passwords are great. Usually not enough, especially in mission-critical equipment. Certificate authority. A lot of the authentication servers that are out there today can also be the certificate authority. I'm definitely a believer in certificate authentication, 8021X, certificate-based authentication. We are in an era now where this has become simplified. This wasn't always an easy task to install certificates on all types of machines and make that process somewhat self-enrolling, self-registration. We're in an area now that you can do that, where students can bring in BYOD devices, load their own certificate, accept the use policy, and now they're on the network, tied to Active Directory or some other authentication source. So see a lot of interest around certificate authority and all of the services that go with that. So once we get our authentication in place, then we take a look at the access media, right? So wireless and switching. And there's a lot of different wireless out there. We'll talk a little bit about wireless. I'm not going to steer you guys one way or another. But with the Internet of Things and all of the devices that are coming onto the network, we have finally passed the amount of wired ports by wireless devices. So 2015 was the year that we passed that. I come from a wireless background. We've been predicting that for years, thought it would have happened 5 or 10 years ago, but in 2015, IDC, Del Oro, and some of the other research companies confirmed that we finally have surpassed the amount of wired switch ports with wireless devices. And that's only going to grow, right? So if that is the most prevalent connection media, what are you guys doing to secure that? Do you have everything in place to do that? There's several different ways to do wireless. There's controller-based wireless, there's cloud-based wireless, private cloud, public cloud, and then there's hybrids of that. And each of those brings with it its kind of own set of positives and negatives, challenges, as well as benefits. So just kind of want to walk through these. There is a growing interest, and you've probably seen this in some of the firewall vendors, to have firewall-controlled wireless, where the firewall is the wireless LAN controller. And then there's those people that make wireless LAN controllers that have firewall features. So there is a lot of security. My personal preference is controlled wireless. We offer it both ways, just so you know, so it's not a company initiative, it's my personal opinion, because there are a lot of things we can do in controlled wireless to manipulate the traffic that can't necessarily do in cloud managed. So in this model, in this particular model, the firewall is the controller. Could be a regular controller sitting there. Traffic is tunneled back to the controller. We've seen this type of technology for 10 plus years. I've been doing wireless as a primary focus for over 10 years. Controllers have been around forever. There are some benefits in controller-based traffic. All the traffic has to flow back through the controller. In some cases, especially with firewall controlled, it has to go through the firewall before it can touch any other layer 2 traffic. So it gets policy enforced, deep packet inspected, application controlled. All of those security services happen right on the firewall. So great thing if you're looking for high security wireless, controlled is probably going to be your friend. There is growing demand in the cloud managed and the controllerless Wi-Fi. There are a lot more security services that are moving to the AP itself, and being able to do that at the edge of the network. Challenge with this is it's really tough to put a full deep packet inspection engine on that AP without consuming all of the CPU cycles. You have to build a purpose-built AP for that. You've got to have a lot of processor, multiple cores, lots of memory, because now you're taking all of that deep packet inspection, so inspecting every packet and pulling it apart and looking for viruses, spyware, malware, botware, before you let that traffic pass. So a little bit of challenge in the cloud managed. Cloud's a great arena for wireless and for the management of it. Having the security services on the AP, though, is critical. You got to be able to do security services at the edge, security services at the core. And so if we kind of look at what those services are, whether cloud managed or controlled wireless, many of the services today, antivirus, right? That's a big one. That's what most of the IPS cycles are used for. Spyware, malware, botware, content filtering. Again, if I can take these security services and do it at the firewall or do it at the edge, or in a hybrid environment, do it at both, I've really got a high layer of security. And that's kind of what I'm starting to see a lot more customers migrate to, is a solution where I'm running security services both at the perimeter and the core. IP reputation, geofencing, a couple new features that are really having some impact. Geofencing, not accepting packets from North Korea, Russia, Iran, really being able to tell where do packets come from, keep those out if they're not pertinent to my operation. IP reputation, right? Command and control servers for botware, spyware out in the internet zone, being able to tell that, hey, that IP has been used before for botnets. Don't allow any traffic to connect to that or talk to that. Time of day scheduling. How many of you guys run, we'll just call them 9 to 5 businesses? Not open after 6 or 7. How many of you guys have wireless that shuts off at the closing hour of the day at 6 o'clock? If you don't, great opportunity to put that feature in place. No reason wireless should be on after 6 o'clock if you're never open. If you're a bank, you're never open after 6 o'clock, right? Why leave wireless on all night so that somebody can come sit in your parking lot and attempt to hack it? Location-based access. Do you have your users defined in a group to where they can only log in from certain points? Little bit of administration to make that happen, but again, if you're in a very security conscious environment, better to have controls like that in place. Two-factor authentication, single sign-on, 802.1x, all great things to make sure you're incorporating. Application control, this is kind of the next big frontier, become very popular in wireless. We're doing it in wireless and LAN switching, being able to deep packet inspect the traffic and control it. And it's not just block and allow, right, because we've had that for some time, but being able to do things like set a quota on it. So maybe I want to allow people the option to use Netflix, Hulu, or some sort of streaming media, but I want to say, hey, you only get 10 minutes a day or you only get 10 gigs a day. Being able to place a quota on that still allows me to be flexible to offer that, but definitely manage that. Or block certain activities and block it at the sub-application layer. So nothing against Facebook, but maybe I want to allow reading of Facebook, but I don't want to allow posting of Facebook, or I don't want to allow playing the farming game. being able to do that at that granular level. And one of the things that we're seeing is there's a lot of new applications that come out every day. Leveraging signature-based application and profiling gives us the ability to, as a new application comes out, post a new signature to traffic shape on that, protect against it on a daily or hourly basis, so that as new things come out, you're not dependent upon a patch or an upgrade to be able to see that. So having that in my wireless and switching is great. What we're also seeing on the switching front is a lot of new and enhanced features. So we're starting to see a lot of firewalls be able to manage switches as well and join them into the firewall policy enforcement. So plug a switch into a firewall, be able to manage it directly from the firewall. So take policies that I've created for wireless or for user groups or device groups, push it right down to the switch itself. So now when I plug an access point into the switch says, hey, I know you're an access point, and I will put you on the access point VLAN, turn up your power, let you go to work. Or plug in a student computer. Oh, I recognize you as a student computer, put you on the student VLAN, and not have any security concerns, or at least apply the right security profile. So that's kind of the direction that switching is going, is to be able to be smart enough to know when something plugs into it what it is and assign it the right profile. In a security environment, very critical, right? Because what I don't want to do is have a student plug in and be on the teacher VLAN and have access to resources on that VLAN or that network segmentation. The greater thing, though, is the security aspect and event correlation that can take place on a switch that's managed via a firewall. So let's say I've got a user that was part of one of the phishing attacks. That computer is now talking to a command and control server outside the network. I want that security event to be detected, and then I want my firewall to tell my switch, hey, switch that user to a remediation port or a quarantine VLAN, shut that port down, and take action on it. Send the user a captive portal that his machine has been compromised and that he needs to update his security profile. Having that level of event correlation at the switch level brings yet another degree of security to the switching that a lot of companies are looking for. So seeing a lot of excitement in the industry about this. A lot of the switch vendors out there are making this a reality, which this is something in the switching environment that we've been looking forward to for years, right? Having that event correlation and automatically taking action on the switch port. So we've talked about access media. Now I want to talk a little bit about the endpoint security, right? So what do we do with these guys? We've talked about whether it's a smartphone or a tablet or a laptop. We've talked about our perimeter firewall, how we protect the traffic coming in. We've talked about the access media, right? Switching and wireless, how they connect to the network. But how do I protect the user? Or if I've given that user that device, how do I protect me as the entity to make sure that what happens on that device is exactly what I'm looking for? So having strong endpoint security, endpoint protection should assist you in credentialing and onboarding, right? If I've got a great endpoint protection system, it can assist with all those, take care of my IPS, antivirus. So having that solution, there's usually a couple other side benefits. It can usually come with some sort of VPN software. Definitely does all of the access control. We're seeing this today more in a unified client, so a client that can do all of this in one very thin agent that sits on the machine itself. Very important to have that vulnerability scanning, right? So making sure that every time that device connects to the network, it's checked. Does it meet policy? Is it running the latest copy of the endpoint protection? You know, looking at that and then either sending that device to quarantine, having it update its security posture, its profile, and then allowing it onto the network. Probably one of the biggest things that I see, though, is the logging and reporting. How many of you guys issue out devices? How many of you guys either give your employees some sort of device? So a bunch of you guys. How many of you know what they do when that device goes off your network? How many of you guys would like to know what they do when that device goes off your network? If you're a state agency or some agent that has to respond to some sort of regulatory compliance, HIPAA, PCI, SOX compliant. Very important that you know what that device does off your network. If we go back to our education example, if you're giving students tablet devices, very important that you know what they do when they take that device home, right? So what we're seeing in a lot of the endpoint protection solutions is the ability to enforce the same policy that they would have if they were sitting on your network. So content filtering, antivirus, deep packet inspection, even application control, but better yet, provide the reporting of what they did with those. So did they try to go to sites that were blocked? Did they pick up viruses? Did they pick up threats that were blocked? What's been going on with that machine? Condensing that into a report that shows them right along with your connected users. So now you've got full visibility of everybody that's connected to the network, either via switch, Ethernet port, wireless, or now even when they're off network. So this is kind of the next big frontier of where we see endpoint compliance. It's not just making sure that when it connects to your network it's compliant, but making sure that when that device goes off your network, you've got the visibility, you've got the reporting, you've got the audit trail, and you've got the peace of mind in knowing that that device is being used for the purpose that you considered. Kind of to take that to the next level, how many of you guys are familiar with sandboxing? Heard of sandboxing, know what it does, right? Sandbox was designed to take unknown files, unknown malware, antivirus, send it to a box that will run that program, blow it up in a virtual image, see what that file does, and then deem it safe or deem it as a threat. We're seeing a lot more of the endpoint protection solutions be able to do this right from the endpoint. So I'm on a website, I download an unknown file, never been seen before by my antivirus, IP reputation doesn't know what it is, geofencing doesn't know what it is, automatically send that file to a sandbox, either at my corporate site or somewhere up in the cloud, determine that file is safe before I can leverage that, open it, take advantage of that. So we start to see a lot of interest in doing that, especially with government agencies where, again, they need that audit trail of what was downloaded, what was it safe or was it malicious. So if we kind of roll this up, what we see is a lot of different areas of the network where we can take a lot of advantage of providing enhanced security services. There's a lot to think about, right? What am I doing for my core firewall? What am I doing for UTM services at the core? Do I need internal segmentation firewalls in my environment? What am I doing on my wired and wireless? What am I doing for authentication? Am I doing endpoint compliance? And do I have a solution to do endpoint integrity and endpoint protection? And when we roll this all up, it will fit into a very nice framework, gives a customer or you guys something to plan around, figure out where the gaps are, where are the security holes, where am I vulnerable, so that you're not getting caught on the back end of paying those exorbitant fees for a breach that could have been protected by implementing something along this path within the solution. So we're seeing a high degree of interest in a framework. It's not a single point product. It's not one solution that saves your network. It's really having all the controls and policy in place all along the network to make sure that you're not vulnerable to attack. So I'm going to stop there. That's what I got for you guys. I'd be happy to take any questions or speak to any of the elements in a security framework. So I'll turn it over to you guys. Any questions that I can answer for you? I think lunch has sat in. Cool. Well, I appreciate your guys' time. I'll be out at the Fortinet table if you guys have any questions. If you want to pick up the design guide for a security framework, be happy to share that with you guys. But thanks for letting me come and present to you guys today.